Welcome to the Lawyer Life podcast, where the personal, professional, and political intersect. Each week, we discuss a topic to help ourselves and other lawyers navigate our days with a little less stress and ideally a lot more fulfillment. On today's episode, we talk about being parents. We're asking ourselves, how does being a parent change our professional lives as lawyers? I am Mike Anderson.
And I'm Darlene Tonelli.
Hello, Mama Darlene.
Is that Papa Mike then?
This is Papa Mike. Yeah.
You are. You're a new... Well, you should talk about that. I will not steal your thunder.
I am a father for the second time. Yeah, that's correct. We welcomed our son, Tommy. Full name is Thomas. But yeah, Tommy came into the world 2 weeks ago today. So yeah, it's been a lovely couple of weeks settling in with him, and our daughter has been lovely with him, and we're now a family of four. So very exciting time.
So in his honor, and in the honor of the entire family, we're going to talk about how to be a lawyer and a parent, and these types of things that come up. Because man, it comes up a lot, and it's becoming sort of I'm seeing it in popular culture. I don't know if it's just because I'm attuned to the issue or what it is, but I think it's something that lawyers are trying to grapple with right now.
You say it comes up a lot, and it actually came up. Being a new father and a professional came up last night during the Raptors game. By the way, go Raptors. Looks like a very exciting game last night. But anyway, one of the players for the Raptors who had a great game, Fred VanVleet, with like so many 3-pointers. It was very exciting. He just became a father this week, within the last week. And people were asking him what his secret to success is because he's been playing so well lately. And he said, 0 sleep, have lots of babies, go out there and let loose. Was the quote.
Nice. Well, it's kind of true, isn't it? I've said before on the podcast that I find that I'm more efficient in a lot of ways since having my kids.
Yeah, totally. And this topic we were motivated to go to not only because of my circumstance, but also there was an article that caused some conversation online by Emily Oster. She's an economist at Brown University, and she has an article in The Atlantic called End the Plague of Secret Parenting, which basically brings to the fore the issue of folks who become parents and feel as though whether, it's, during pregnancy or thereafter, that they have to hide that part of their life at the workplace. And it's a great article to kind of process this issue and to see that it is potentially a problem that, parents kind of have to balance, being 100% an employee in the workplace and then obviously 100% a parent when they get home. And it's hard to do that because life is a bit more fluid.
Well, and I found her use of the word parent interesting too, because I think that way too much of the focus in the past decade, and maybe properly, although I think it's time for a transition in the discussion. I think most of the focus on kids in the workforce has centered on moms.
Mm-hmm.
I really do. And as I kind of advance in my own career, I just think it is just not only a mom issue. I mean, there's a certain biology that drives different considerations for the person actually having the baby. That's real. That's not going to go away. But then on top of that, there is a ton of pressure. Like I think when women come back from maternity leave, or when women are contemplating how to tell people that they're pregnant and that things are going to change while they're on maternity leave and things like that. Obviously, here in Canada, where people can take up to 18 months now split between the father and mother, that is a bigger issue for employers. In the States, I think it's like 2 months is the mat leave. So depending where listeners are coming from, there's a whole different context for this conversation. But I wonder, from your perspective as a new dad, do you think that dads are under the same pressure to be secret parents as I think moms feel that they are?
I would say not. And I would say, like most things, at least in my experience, you get all the benefits with far fewer drawbacks. So even to start with, when you talk about pregnancy, I was having this conversation with a friend of mine, and he was able to tell his boss at work, who's a female, about his wife's pregnancy, very early on, and was very happy to do so. And it was well received at work, and congratulations, and all positive, right? Really wonderful. Whereas his wife had to effectively, or felt as though she had to hide it at her workplace. And how different is that experience on its own, right? Like one person's being celebrated and revered, and isn't this wonderful? And the other person feels like they have to carry this secret until a point where it'll just become too obvious. And then you feel like you're deceiving, or, you have a negative feeling about what you're doing in the workplace. Largely because of a culture that's imposed upon the female in certain workplaces, that, that's an inconvenience and you're causing us problems. And what about your projects and so on? So even from the outset, I think that you have that the guys have a lot of the benefits. And then when I found, after becoming a dad at first, almost 3 years ago, I was able to, now have easier chat fodder with coworkers and, clients and other folk, and put me on a level with people that are, 20 years older than me, that I otherwise would have had difficulty to get to. So again, a lot of advantages, but I didn't have to deal with a lot of the negativity that I think, most females might have to deal with when, especially in the early stages of a child coming along.
Well, I think there's a lot in that, right? So I think one of the reasons why dads are celebrated on the announcement and women and moms are not is because the employer and the team around them are really feeling the impending loss of the person as a worker, right? And I think the fact that men are still, to this day, it's not yet widely acceptable to take a paternity leave of any reasonable length. I mean, most paternity leaves look more like a small vacation, right? It's kind of like it's not a big inconvenience to the team. So I think until paternity leaves start to be as inconvenient to the team as a maternity leave can be perceived to be, there will always be that different reception. I think, though, the other layer on top of that is that I think there's still a perception that once a mom becomes a mom, she's not committed to her career anymore.
Right.
And that is just absolutely not the case about dads. And I think, again, it's a function of dads have not historically been as present in the lives of the child. And I think we're still, as a society, trying to figure out how to deal with high-powered moms in the workplace, and how dads have to be there and adjust to that new reality. I mean, this was not something that existed 40 years ago at any scale, right? It's not to say there weren't women in the workplace back then, but, to have a role reversal in some of the traditional things is new. And I think I don't get too upset about it. I just try to look at like the why, like why are people, this is like my constant questioning on the podcast, but why do women experience that differently? Why do people assume that having a child means that women will no longer be committed to their job? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
Well, I think, going back to men not taking leaves, this is something that I think, I've thought about a lot recently, obviously. When we're in a environment still where women aren't provided equal pay for equal work, right? Economically, like just in real terms, like paying the mortgage and all that sort of stuff, there's an incentive for the man to continue to work, and there's a disincentive for the woman to continue to work. And so that's a structural thing that I think that actually has very real effects for people when making these decisions. So that's something that has to be solved. And then the societal view of of women and mothering it's just so inherent. There's instances in the article about women who don't put up pictures or don't at all have any evidence that they're in their offices, that they're parents. I've also heard, I think it's a bit of a catch-22 though, because I've also heard that, a new mother goes back to the office and she sets up her office the way it was before, i.e. no evidence of kids. And then people come in and give her crap for, where your don't you care about your kids? Where are your kids' pictures? And I don't think that a lot of times women can win either way.
Well, I think that goes to a deeper problem, which is, and really, I thought about this when I read that Atlantic article, but, there's a lot of secret and pretending at work, right? Like there's a lot of, like, here's a basic one, pretending that all I care about is work. I think that's a pretense that happens at a lot of places.
Yeah.
Not everybody does it, but you see it and you're like, God, I know that person has interests outside of work. Why won't they be, why don't they feel comfortable saying that? Like, we aren't these people who just work. And I feel like it's a disservice to have inauthentic relationships, obviously, in any sphere. But I do, just because I have the good fortune of working in a company where I get to kind of set the tone for these types of issues, um, I'm really mindful of the fact that there really isn't within our team any kind of pressure that says people shouldn't talk about their lives and their families, and that's obviously by design. But I think that's a privilege that we have, and it's not everywhere. And I don't think that it's something that um, we should take like lightly. But I also think that I take it very seriously that I should talk about my kids so that other people feel that they can, if they want to. They don't have to. I think it starts with the types of conversations that we have, and then it kind of bubbles up into bigger issues like who takes the leave and um, stuff like that.
Yeah, to your credit, I think as somebody who gets to enjoy the setup that you've created and the culture that you've created. You're speaking about the time you spend with your kids, and the article acknowledges this. The valuable time between 5 and 8 o'clock. During the week, that's a central time for parents. That's a time where you get the kids from school or daycare, you spend some time, you have dinner, you do bath stories, bed, all that sort of stuff. I know that you have a similar sort of schedule as I do in that regard, and I know that you pick up the laptop if need to be after bedtime. And last night you and I were emailing back and forth at a time that was good for us being parents, and I know I can do that because of the culture that you've set up in that way. You've acknowledged that that's a reality in your life, and therefore I can acknowledge that and embrace that reality and not fight against it. And what that allows for is that I then do and can spend 5 to 8 with my kids every day. And that makes me happier and it makes me more fulfilled. And I would say it makes me do better work. And if I do have to pick up my laptop after bedtime, I'm not resentful. I'm not upset. I feel like I'm able to maximize the time I have in the day, how it makes the most sense. So I think that's one bit that folks can do if you are a partner, if you are in charge of any type of workplace. That position of power allows you to, put yourself out there if you feel comfortable to do so. Let people know that being using time flexibly as a parent is a great thing and helpful. And you're doing it yourself, and especially men partners out there. If you leave at 5 and pick up the kids from daycare, I would say that would send a great message to the folks at your firm. That it's okay to be a parent, it's okay to be a father that prioritizes his kids outside of work time. 5 o'clock is a time to be with your kids.
Well, and let's face it, I mean, you and I have both done our time pre-kid with the 5 to 8 window. I mean, I used to think it would be unfathomable not to work during that
Yeah.
window. And I think that there's room in a lifetime career in law or any other profession to work the hours that you can work when you can work them. And I think one of the really unfair things about the way that the traditional law firm model is set up is that the childbearing years and the child rearing, really these early years when they really need you, they really do. It's not really
Yeah.
optional. You can outsource a certain degree of the function and you can set that up as a choice for the family. But it's not like when they're 18 and they can go take the bus somewhere by themselves. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, everything is that either you're doing it or you're making a choice about how to have it done. And that's just a fact. But I do look at that and I just think there is room to not have the heavy child rearing years be also the years that you have to grind it out to make partner. It just happens to be that that's how we've got it structured. And when you really ask the question, it's like, well, that's to make maximum revenue in a lifetime, right? Like, that's the reason for that structure. But at the same time, I always my next blog post is on this topic, so it's very top of mind for me. But I just always think about, we earn money in our life, but we also spend our time, right? Like, so you're choosing how to spend your time. And if you're spending all of it to earn money and you're not spending it with your children, or you're not spending it on things that matter to you, then, arguably it's a different calculus of how you're making your living, I guess. I don't think that's a normal, it's not a common way to think about money, but that is how I think about it. And I definitely am starting to look at all of these issues as very much on the table for discussion, right? Like, it's not, to me, it's not if someone doesn't work between 5 and 8, it's not because they're automatically a slacker. I don't know what the reason is that they're not working between 5 and 8, but they have tasks to get done, and those tasks will get done or they won't, right?
Yeah.
And if they don't, it shall be revealed, as my wise friend says. Like, it's not about, I think there's a lot of fear in law firms that if we take the pedal off the metal, and if we allow people the freedom to dictate the way that their day is going to be, that everyone's just going to put the pens down and have a free for all. And that's not my experience. I think that all of us are really hard, maybe not all, but I think, lawyers as a group are a pretty hardworking bunch. And we can be trusted to make the right decisions. And at the end of the day, the clients will speak if the work is not getting done, and we own that. Like, that's how our business works, and that's how it should work, as opposed to the partner who worked insane hours and had a stay-at-home spouse and never saw their children or outsourced the work, demands that of everybody else because that's how it's done, right? Like, there's a very fundamental difference between those two positions, I think.
Yeah, I think when it comes to making that decision of, it's this could be a decision you make not just about parenting. It could be about, other family members to take care of, or prioritizing your interests or passions outside of the law. In the end, I think what the battle here is the battle over, the potentially the ego of, being in that process of, being quote unquote successful as a lawyer. That means at this age you're doing X, and that means at this age you're doing X, and that can be partnership or a number of other things. But perhaps it's actually just taking a look at what you individually want, and understanding how to structure your professional life and your personal life to achieve the sort of balance that you need to, and the thing you want.
Well, and you raise an interesting point, because the other assumption that I find comes up all the time is we're going to retire at 65 and then we're going to do all the things that we didn't do when we were working so hard, which was very much the prevailing orthodoxy prior to our generation, probably. Still is. Still is. But I don't know. I've said it before on the podcast to say, like, the problem is you think you have time. And I don't know. We never know how much time we have. And one of the things, a friend of mine, Mike Ross, does a podcast called Boiling the Ocean, very similar to our podcast, except it's from the management consultant's perspective. And they did an episode on work-life balance, coincidentally, that I was listening to this morning. And in that, these are two men that do a podcast in conversation format from the very hard-driving management consultant world. And they say, one of the common pieces of wisdom about parenting in that world is, oh, no, it's not the quantity you spend. No, it's not the quantity of time. It's the quality that you spend with your children. And, I question that. And so did they, rightly, on the podcast, which is, it is the quantity, though, that kind of determines the quality with kids. Because as we've talked about before, like, my son's expectation is that I'm here all the time. And anything that's a diminishment of that is not good in his view. And that, it doesn't mean that I have to live my life to deliver on that expectation. But I have to understand that I have to create the conditions in which he has enough exposure to me that quality moments can happen. I can't necessarily plan that. And this is a point that they made on the Boiling the Ocean podcast. It's just, I can't necessarily plan that I've got an hour and we're going to jam in a quality conversation. Like, if he never sees me, that's not going to be what he's doing in that hour. He's not even going to maybe know how to relate with me. So I don't know that I think it is such a personal decision. I think every child is different, every family is different. I don't actually have like a solid out of the box judgment on, if there isn't, I think if people want to just work and that's the life that you've decided you want, and you find your sweet spot, I don't really have a problem with that. What I have a problem with, and what I try to kind of address with you on this podcast, is just the idea that that's the only way. That's the problem. It doesn't, like, there can be people who can make a choice to be a workaholic to the exclusion of all else. But that doesn't mean that I just think we hear too much from them in the legal profession, like, oh, there's the vaunted status that that person has because they're such heavy billers. Like, okay, that's
Hmm.
one thing. But what about, let's hear from the dad that you mentioned who goes at 5 o'clock to pick up his kids and demonstrates to people that he has a life outside the office. That's valuable too, maybe different, but it is valuable. So, yeah, I think all of this conversation is not to kind of rain down on the traditional model. It's just to say there are options, and there are a lot of stories that we all tell ourselves about kids, and what works and what doesn't. And I think we have to be really mindful of, is that story true for our own kid? I don't know. And if it's
Yeah.
not, the years are so short. I mean, my son, yesterday, for the first time, he kind of like wanted to ride his bike instead of holding my hand after school. And I just died a small death inside. I thought, no, you have to hold my hand until you're at least 7. And it's a special thing to be able to do that. So
Yeah, and I think speaking kind of similar to um, the time conversation we had last episode, I think as a profession, we often are inclined to contract out certain things in our life, work around the house, or sometimes childcare, and you talking about the handholding after school, that's important to you. But to somebody who doesn't have the picking up after school experience, that might seem like nothing,
right.
and so I don't know, I take great joy in the nitty gritty, and sometimes it's important to know that your kid has a diaper rash because maybe that informs why they're just acting out, that
Right.
takes you changing the diaper, so I think it's a really rich part of life, and as I said, we're really, I think, oftentimes encouraged or trained to say, it's not efficient for you to do X, so get somebody else to do it. There's hidden value, I think, that we oftentimes overlook.
Well, and frankly, I think the key, well, we can wrap it up with maybe this thought, but I think this stuff is important to talk about, not in this war of like what's better, parent or not parenting. I still would say that the choice to not become a parent, I fully respect, and I don't think that this is. I don't necessarily believe that being a parent is like the key to a full life. And I don't believe also that the only thing that gets you a ticket out of the office between 5 and 8 is having children.
Yeah, right. Yep.
I think there are lots of life choices that people can make. I think it starts with one, honesty about, who you are as a human being and what your interests are and what keeps you sane. And if that's a daily workout, then do the daily workout. Don't pretend that you're a slogger and then have to get a health crisis to kick you into gear at 40. The second thing is, I think these issues about looking at what it actually means to raise children while being high-powered professionals, so to speak, in this world where you could always be working, is a really fundamental thing that we have to go through as a society. Because I think there has historically been a real misunderstanding between men and women of the value of that work. I think even women really devalued it when we first came into the workforce. I know I certainly did not appreciate the value of what my mom did for us until I became a mother myself. I think the misunderstanding of how valuable women's skills traditionally were plays into some of the pay equity issues in the workplace. It plays into issues that I discuss with female lawyers a lot, which is, there is often an expectation we'll just volunteer to do things. That's the expectation. And I do not see that expectation on similarly experienced men of my vintage. I think that these types of issues are, they say things start at home. And I really think that a better understanding of both men and women, of what happens in the home and how men, it's not safe to assume either that men want to escape the home and things that people say. Like, I think that there is room for improvement there, and that all of this engagement with the topic can help us get there. So that's kind of why I spend the time doing it. I don't spend a ton of time really talking about this in public, but I think it's something that I hear it a lot from male and female lawyers, actually, that reach out to me about inter alia. And it's very top of mind, but there's a pretense that it's not, that I'd like to help remove if we can. Think we can do it? 30 minutes of a podcast?
Yeah, I think we solved the problem. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
We did it. Pat ourselves on the back, move on, and never have to think about it ever again.
It's a heavy topic, but yeah, it's also good to solve it in 30 minutes. I think that was positive. It was good use of time.
I feel so satisfied. Let's call it a day. Go pick our kids up early from daycare.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
We'll do goods and grapes anyway after the break.
The Lawyer Life podcast is brought to you by Inter Alia Law, experienced legal counsel when and where you need us. To learn more about Inter Alia, visit the website. That's spelled INTERALIA-law.com. Thank you. And we are back with our goods and gripes. Goods are things we want to promote and support. Gripes are things that annoy us. Darlene.
Okay, I'm going to start with a gripe, because my gripe this week is actually in the Mike genre of gripes. And I had a laugh last night thinking about you when I was having this gripe to myself.
Okay.
So I go to the gym because one of the things I've been neglecting over the past few years is my own fitness regimen, which I do take a lot of stress relief and stuff from. So I'm getting back into that. And I'm at the gym where I'm going to work on the elliptical and do some weights. And I was driving around looking for a closer parking spot for like 2 minutes. And I was not alone. There were other cars circling for the closer parking spot. And I thought to myself, I have a gripe about myself in this moment. I should just park at the other end of the parking lot, because I'm here for exercise. What am I doing? Anyway, thank you.
I have always, it's actually a historical gripe of mine.
What?
Is people driving to go run on a treadmill. That has always been so bothersome to me.
That's like a next level gripe. Yes. It's an elliptical.
Especially when it's nice out. Just run outside. Then you don't have to go in your car.
That's such a 30-something thing of you to say. I used to run outside, and you will talk to me when you are my age, and we will discuss how your knees feel about running on the sidewalks. This is
okay.
So we'll discuss. This is like an old person's issue that's coming up here. Look, the generation gap makes.
But you were on an elliptical, which is different than a treadmill for the purposes of my gripe.
Low impact, but still, I can walk. I could walk, for example, outside, and I could. Anyway, yes, for many years, running was my exercise of choice, and then it became progressively harder and harder on my knees, and now I'm just an elliptical person. But anyway, that's not why I don't walk from the far reaches of the parking lot. I honestly didn't even notice I was doing it until I realized I was waiting for a spot.
There's also something about, and I'm aligned with this, getting a good parking spot is among the most satisfying small things that you can experience in life.
It really is. It becomes a good.
So great.
Do you have a gripe and we can end with good?
I do have a gripe. This is also, it's not really related, but I was in the grocery store line yesterday, and the person in front of me individually, like with the produce plastic bags, individually bagged all of her produce, even bananas, which what blew my mind. Why do your bananas have to be in a plastic? You're not going to eat the skin of a banana. It's protecting the fruit. What are you protecting the bananas from?
I don't know. Did you advise her that that was going to end up in the ocean to the detriment of us all?
That's right. Why are you doing it? Oh gosh. And it was just like, there was an onion, a single onion in a plastic bag. What kind of world do we live in?
Wow. That is,
Yeah.
that's a legit gripe.
Thank you. You have a good?
I do have a good on the topic. I went to Canadian Music Week last week or a couple weeks ago, and I saw Dave Grohl, who's one of my favorite rock stars, interview his mother for the occasion of Mother's Day. And she has written a book about how to raise a rock star kid called From Cradle to Stage. And the book is basically a series of interviews with rock star moms and sort of tries to identify some of the common threads between, what they were doing to raise these really authentic, awesome kids. And I think for the reason I wanted to bring it up as a good on this podcast was, I would say the main takeaway that I took from the interview was the thing that these people did is they just allowed their kids to be who they were going to be. That's really what they did. I think they were pretty engaged for the most part. A lot of them were single moms. Most of these rockers did not have dads in the picture. And man, just really, Dave Grohl's mom was a teacher at the high school that he dropped out of to go on tour as a 16-year-old. That's got to be rough on the old ego. As a mom, you teach at this high school, you can't keep your kid in school. But meanwhile, that decision worked out pretty well for her. So I was really touched by that. And I think to the theme of parenting, it's not clear that there's a recipe for success, but I think there is, love can go a long way, and being as present as you humanly can be. All of these parents seem to have worked very hard. I don't think any of them were just full-time dedicated parents, but their kids came out of it with a really strong sense of self. And I was really heartened to see that. So that's my good.
On that note, just because you bring it up, single parents, my goodness, I'm astounded. Yeah. Single parents are good. How do you do it? I just think you're all heroes. Incredible. Yeah. Anyway, totally. Moving on from that very significant good, I have two goods. First of all, I have to make my obligatory sports reference, which I already kind of did. The Raptors are a win away from being in the NBA Finals, and I have never been so enthralled by a playoff run of a basketball team, certainly, and not for a Toronto team in a long time since the Jays were involved. So, what great fun it is to watch them! They're so exciting. And I came across first a song, and now I understand it's from a documentary. I think you'll like this, Darlene. Jacob Dylan and Fiona Apple, so Blast from the Past, they have a duet cover of In My Room by the Beach Boys, written by Brian Wilson, which is a beautiful cover. It's a great song. And it comes from this documentary that actually premieres today, I think, in LA, called Echo in the Canyon. And it focuses on the development of the LA mid 1960s music scene and sound that came out of that time. And so the soundtrack features songs by Brian Wilson, Eric Clapton, and so on, but covered by Beck and Norah Jones and Regina Spektor and Cat Power. And so I think it'll be I'm looking forward to seeing the movie, but certainly I'm already listening to the soundtrack, and it is spectacular. Really nice listen. So
great. Thank you for the tip. I always appreciate these these Mike Anderson music tips. This is good.
I don't know where we'll be able to access the documentary, but at least Spotify has the I'm sure Apple Tunes or whatever the heck it's called.
Apple Music. Yes, Apple Tunes. They should have thought of that. That would have been a good one. Anyway, well, this has been great. I think maybe to be continued. There's a lot to say on this topic, but I think this is a good start and very timely in honor of your new arrival.
Yeah, Tommy.
Yay. Okay. Well, have a great weekend.
Okay, you too. We'll talk soon.
Talk soon.
That's it for this week's episode of LLP. Thanks to Inter Alia Law for presenting the podcast and to Nick Fowler for composing and performing our music. See our show notes for his website. Don't forget, we love feedback. Please comment in the review section or subscribe or like. We'd appreciate it greatly. That's it. Talk soon.